Ladies and gentlemen, once again, you're welcome to the World Youth Skills Day virtual event presented by Regent University College of Science and Technology in Accra, Ghana. My name is Ben Larbi, and I'm the head of the communications unit at Regent and the moderator for tonight's virtual session. So by way of background, the World Youth Skills Day is a special day declared by the United Nations General Assembly, which recognizes the importance of equipping young people with skills for employment, decent work, and entrepreneurship. So the theme for this year's World Youth Skills Day is Youth Skills for Peace and Development. And in commemoration of this year's World Youth Skills Day, this virtual session is being organized on the theme Repositioning for a New World Order. So this virtual series will explore the global changes in the 21st century world of work and the skills required to adapt and to thrive in this era. So the series will focus on three key topics, which is emotional intelligence, effective communication, and leadership. So for the first session of this virtual series taking place today, we are privileged to have Dr. Evelyn Owusu Roberts, who's a licensed clinical psychologist and faculty member at Regent. And she'll be speaking on the topic Thriving Through Emotional Intelligence. So after her presentation, there'll be a question and answer session. So if you have any questions bordering on her presentation or on the topic of the discussion for tonight, you can feel free to drop your question in the in-call messages app, or you can wait for the Q&A session and you'll be given an opportunity to ask your question. And our speaker would endeavor to answer your question. So at this juncture, we'll proceed to listen to Dr. Roberts' presentation, and I'll briefly read her profile so that we get an overview of who she is. All right, so Dr. Evelyn Owusu Roberts is a psychology lecturer at Regent and a licensed clinical psychologist. With her extensive expertise, she frequently serves as a panelist on radio and TV shows, enlightening audiences on issues bordering on psychology and mental health. Her passion lies in applying the concepts and principles of psychology to enrich everyday life. Dr. Owusu Roberts mentors and guides students as they navigate their post-university journey. As part of her practice, she helps clients to communicate impactfully and effectively through verbal and non-verbal communication. Beyond her professional pursuits, she's deeply committed to the empowerment of individuals in their journey towards living out their best lives. She's particularly proud of her Christian faith and passionate about God. Notably, Dr. Owusu Roberts is not only a thought leader, but also a creative writer. She's the author of two captivating novels, Breath of Faith and Against the Tides. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome Dr. Evelyn Owusu Roberts to share her presentation. Over to you, Doc.
Thank you so much. So today, my topic is Thriving Through Emotional Intelligence. So we are going to first look at an introduction to the subject. We are going to look at the importance of emotional intelligence, a little bit of that, and we'll look at some key components. We'll do a practice session, so I'm really looking forward to you being engaged in this session so that we can practicalize what we are learning, and then we shall have the conclusion. So I think I'm going to really start by talking about, emotional intelligence and how important it is. It's really, something that is it requires continued growth. So, and what that means is that even though I am talking about emotional intelligence today, even I need to grow in emotional intelligence. There are certain, situations that will, alert you to the fact that, it's really important to be, emotionally intelligent. As a matter of fact, there was one time I had to actually talk on emotional intelligence, and it really struck me because of some of the things that happened while I was talking about emotional intelligence, it really drew a reaction out of me. And I was really thinking about the fact that, wow, I'm talking about emotional intelligence, but I could use with a little bit more emotional intelligence right this moment. I'm just saying this to say this is like a growth opportunity, and so we learn more, we know more, and then we continue to be more aware and then do more, and it really has some significant impacts on our lives. So what is emotional intelligence? Well, simply, we'll say that it's the ability to understand, manage, and express our own emotions effectively. Okay, so sometimes we may be feeling, we may be having a certain emotional experience, but to be able to communicate clearly about the emotional, experience that we are having, to even be able to understand the emotional experience that we are having, and to even be able to manage our emotions, effectively, so that you can also express your emotions appropriately. It's basically what emotional intelligence is about. But it's not really only about the self, where you are only understanding your own, personal, emotions, and being able to understand it, and being able to manage it, and being able to communicate appropriately about how you are feeling. But it also has to do about doing that for other people, right? Because we interact with other people. And so it's really looking at being aware of another person's emotions as well, and also being able to respond to them empathically. So that other person could be a beloved, that other person could be a co-worker, someone that you're in a team with. That person could be your boss. It could be anyone that you have to basically interact with, where there's some sort of emotions that is basically observed or engaged in that situation. Now, when we say that someone has high emotional intelligence, what does it mean? It basically means that the person can identify their own emotions. So they can say, "Oh, okay, it seems like right now I'm a little bit upset. It seems like right now I am sad. It seems like right now I'm really happy." You know, and this person also needs to be able to identify the emotions of other people, to be able to tell accurately what they are feeling. Also, when someone has high emotional intelligence, they're able to use emotional signals to influence the person's one's thoughts and actions. So what does that mean? Let's say that you are having an interaction with somebody else, and then you realize that this person, what I'm saying seems to be going the wrong way, because the person is really having an emotional experience that is maybe negative and really not something that I intended. And so what that means is that maybe you decide that you have to have a time out where you both take a break and then revisit the situation. Okay. Or you decide that maybe you are going to be very conscious about your tone, and how you are communicating, or you are going to really be conscious about even your body language, and so being able to um, assess one's emotional signal will allow you to, basically look at maybe this interaction that I'm having, how can I really let it be more beneficial? Okay. It also allows us to differentiate between various feelings accurately. Okay, so that you can actually know that, okay, so that you don't misinterpret emotions. Because once you are misinterpreting any emotion, it can lead to maybe certain conclusions, behaviors, actions, or thoughts that may not be intended. It also allows you to assign appropriate labels to emotions. So when you are emotionally intelligent, you're able to say, okay, now this person seems really stressed, this person seems really upset, so you are really appropriately labeling the emotion. Then it also allows for the adaptation of emotional responses, so that you can really look at how you need to respond emotionally to different situations. So, for example, in the public domain, there is an expectation of how one needs to react emotionally. However, when you are in an intimate relationship, for example, your emotional responses tend to be different. So, really looking at, okay, I can behave emotionally appropriately, in this situation, and this is what it will look like when it's maybe a personal situation, when I'm with friends, and how when I'm like in a work setting, for example. However, before we move on, it's going to be important to recognize that it is possible for one to have difficulty with everything that we are talking about, being able to understand emotions, manage emotion, and express one's emotions effectively. So, for example, I think we may all have heard about autism. Sometimes people believe that autism, is basically more of like an intellectual, condition where an individual may have like some intellectual disabilities, quote unquote. But then when we're looking at autism, it's really about, how one behaves socially, and how one also behaves, emotionally, and the understanding that one is able to get. And so when we are looking at autism, we find that someone who has autism may not be able to really understand, manage, and express their emotions and the emotions of other people appropriately. Okay, and so when sometimes when we find that somebody is not able to do that, rather than jumping to conclusions, we may want to look at what else might be going on with that individual if they are not able to understand emotions, manage emotions, and express one's own emotions effectively. I mean, when we are even looking at some other mental health conditions, this can impact one's ability to really act in a way that shows their emotional intelligence. So you can imagine that someone is really stressed. When you are really stressed, sometimes it can really impact your ability to express good emotional intelligence. When you are depressed, it can impact your ability to express, some emotional intelligence, because already that individual may be feeling sad, they may be feeling naturally irritable as part of, which is part of the symptoms of depression. They may be feeling fatigued, and you have all of these even personal emotions to handle. And then you find that that individual may not even be capable of managing, understanding, and expressing, and looking at another person's emotions and being empathic. And so sometimes these are some of the things we need to take into consideration when we find that someone may not be exhibiting the kind of emotional intelligence that we expect. But let us look also at the importance of emotional intelligence. One is that we are really looking at it really helping us to be effective leaders. It helps us to be effective leaders. So when a leader has a high emotional intelligence, they can really inspire and motivate their team. They can build trust. They can foster a very positive work environment. You can imagine working in a place and having the kind of leader that is really understanding. A kind of leader that doesn't just that is really in tune with the fact that as a human being you also have emotions. And so the fact that maybe they are your employer or they are your leader, that means that you have no feelings. And so then having these kind of leaders talk to you anyway, and really not really caring about things like motivational issues, and even being able to inspire a team. All of these things are really important, and a good leader, an effective leader, also has an awareness that the people that they are leading have, yes, they have like an analytical aspect of them, but then they also have an emotional aspect of aspect of them as well, because you are dealing with human beings. And so because of that, you really want to take care not just of you just want to lead them, not just on a cognitive level, but you also want to be able to lead them on an emotional level too as well. And so when you have an effective leader who has good emotional intelligence, they are really able to handle stress. They're able to remain resilient during a crisis, and they are also able to make decisions that takes into consideration the rational aspects and the emotional aspects. So you might you have a leader who has a decision to make, and maybe it may be a hard decision that they have to make. But sometimes leaders make decisions because from a purely analytical level. However, when that happens, you have to know how might this decision affect the people I'm leading emotionally too as well. And when a leader is able to do that, we say that that leader has like high emotional intelligence. Then we look at teamwork, being able to work on a team, whether as a student, whether as a worker. When one has high emotional intelligence, it really helps you, to be able to understand your team member. It can help you really look at communicating effectively, so that the collaboration that you are also doing can also go on emotionally. Okay. Sometimes we have maybe team members, and we have sometimes, because of the different personalities that we can have in a team, we may have someone who is a little bit more boisterous, that extrovert, that person who may want to take over everything and really not want to really take into consideration the input of others. And then we may also have that team member who is more quiet and who may not necessarily want to have their voice heard when working on a team collaboration. But when you have even one person who has that high emotional intelligence, or has good emotional intelligence, that individual can really affect how the team works together, and can really make that team collaboration more effective, because then you are really in tune with how someone is feeling, you are really communicating well, you are really being empathic, and then all of these things really help when we are looking at the team collaboration. And we also have conflict resolution. As long as we have people with different personalities, who come from different backgrounds, who have different values, different mindsets, there is going to be conflict. Now, the question becomes, when there is a conflict, how do you resolve it? Because conflict is not a matter of, will there ever be? A conflict is really about, okay, when there is, how do we really resolve it? And sometimes people handle conflicts very, very differently. There are those who will run from conflicts, and not want to ever engage or communicate. There are those who really handle conflicts very badly because they don't have the skill sets to be able to really communicate with another person in a way that they feel heard. And so we are looking at having the right tools to be able to handle conflicts well. One of the important tools, is emotional intelligence, because conflicts tend to bring emotions out of us. Okay. Now, when one has good emotional intelligence, it really helps that individual to really manage the conflict productively, by understanding another person's perspective, remaining calm under pressure, and being able to find mutually beneficial solutions which can reduce tensions and then foster harmony. Sometimes when it comes to a mutually beneficial solution, it can even lie in the fact that both of you agree to disagree. It could be that you agree that maybe you both want to solve this peacefully. It doesn't necessarily mean that to for a conflict to be resolved, everyone, like, it has to be a yes, because sometimes it just doesn't happen that way realistically. But then the way in which, a conflict is resolved, even if, one person, doesn't necessarily have everything that they want. Okay, it's also really important. So in conflict resolution, one of the important things is what we call perspective shifting, or being able to look at whatever it is from another person's perspective. And this is really an important skill. It really requires you to almost erase yourself to a certain extent, where you basically look at how the other person is looking at the situation from their perspective. It really requires you to put down your lens and take up their lens or their glasses to see how things are looking like from their perspective. And sometimes when you are able to do that, if you develop the skill to do that, it really helps you to be more empathetic, because you really understand, oh, okay, I see how this other person sees the situation. It doesn't necessarily mean that you agree with, the conclusions that have been, come up with. But then just being able to understand that, oh, okay, I see what you mean. That is really an important skill. It's almost like, a skill of dying to self. But if one is able to do that, have that kind of composure and restraint, to really do that perspective shifting, especially when they also see or have a very different perspective, it can be really important, because it requires you to be calm to do that. It requires your emotions to be at a level where you can actually shift perspectives. It is difficult for one to do perspective shifting if their emotions are high and they are tense. It really requires you to be able to keep your emotions in check, and then move to, doing that perspective shifting. Then we have customer relations. I think, especially in this new world where we are, we have much more people, selling online or engaging in businesses online than we ever have. And so what that means is that, like, you tend to have a lot of people who have to deal with customers, especially if you're an online salesperson, or like you have any business and there's an online capacity, or like you have like customers that you have to relate with if you are selling a product. And so being able to relate well with customers is really important, because once you're able to do that, you keep that customer coming. And one of the important things when it comes to customer relations really has to do with being able to have good emotional intelligence, being able to empathize with the customer's needs and concerns. And this can lead to better service delivery, because once you're able to empathize with the client, really understand what your clients needs, you can really serve them better, and then the customer is satisfied, and then you have a loyal customer. Okay, so when there are complaints, and I think we are in the world of the customer is always right, even when they are not right. Okay, so being able to handle those complaints with empathy and professionalism is also really important. And so good emotional intelligence really helps with customer relations. It helps with conflict resolution. It also helps with the ability to adapt and be resilient. Okay, we live in a world which there is really stressful. There are a lot that needs to be worked on. Okay, here in Ghana and even globally. I mean, there's a saying, say, baby, enjoy. Like, everyone is kind of feeling the heat of the world that we are in. No matter where you live. And so what that means is that it is really important to be able to be adaptable, and resilient. So be adaptable means that no matter the changes that happen in your life, you are able to handle it. You're able to handle it, you're able to evolve, you're able to grow, no matter what you are faced with. And it's an important skill. It's an important skill. Sometimes I tell my students that when I'm talking about adaptability, you know, um, that like we are adapting all of the time. We are adapting all of the time. So for example, if you are a new student, being a new student really requires you to be adaptable. What that means is that now you have like a timetable, and then you have to be at a certain place at a certain time. What that means is that you have to use every skill that you have, your skill of organization, your skill of planning, your skill of, even creativity, to be able to get, that's done, because now you are a new student. And it's the same thing with starting a new job. So now you have to be able to adapt to the new environment and the requirements of work. Okay, so we are adapting, and we need to adapt to, be people who are able to adapt to a lot of different situations. And this really fosters resilience. And having high emotional intelligence or good emotional intelligence can really help with that, because then sometimes the thing with change is that sometimes change is not always pleasant. Okay, change is not always pleasant, because even if, for example, you get a really great job, it may require that, oh, you have to wake up really early to be able to get there. It requires some stress, it requires some maneuvering. So although you may be happy with this new opportunity, it still requires you to manage some emotional aspects of what this is required. It requires you to, manage some stress. And so what that means is that you really have to have good emotional intelligence, so that the any uncertainty that comes up, any changes that comes up, we are able to manage our emotions well, so that we can also deal with the situation. Sometimes when people are stressed, they don't necessarily manage their emotions well, and you find that the results are really unpleasant, and then you may find that there are some unprofessionalism that really happens as a result. So another reason why emotional intelligence is important is because it really helps with decision making. Balances analytical skills and your decision making problems by also considering emotional factors. Okay, and so when you are making a decision and you consider, the very practical, cognitive, very practical reasons of why, that decision needs to be made. You also have to consider, some of the emotional factors, not to basically be swayed by the emotional factors, but to be able to just take care of the emotions behind, the decision, if you need to do that. Okay, so when you're looking at decision making, we one of the things that we also say is that you don't really make decisions, especially permanent decisions, when you are very emotional. When you are very emotional, so for example, if you are deciding on a divorce, for example, you don't decide to get a divorce when you are very emotional and you just had like a fight. you know I've had clients who've come to me saying, I'm really thinking about like making my divorce official, or like to go through a divorce, but then I want to make sure that it's not an emotional decision I'm making, but it's really like a practical decision that I'm also making. And this is kind of what we need to be able to do when we are making decisions. We can't remove the emotional aspects of us, but then at the same time, we can't really rely solely on the emotional aspects of us when we are making decisions. And so there has to be a good balance when we are looking at this is really practical, but then also taking care of any emotional, complication, or any emotional aspect, any emotional output, that may come out of the decision that we need to make as well. We all have parents or have had parents or a parenting figure. We've all existed in family or are in the families now. And when it comes to emotional intelligence, it's important in this too, whether we are currently parents or we will be parents. It's important to really look at, the emotions of our children. and being able to understand them better, and really helping to foster a nurturing and supportive environment for them too as well. Okay. I think sometimes we can go online and then we see all of these memes about how parents of millennials, like for example, the African parent, I think we may have seen all of that, and how the African parent has tended to be. But then there's a shift that is happening where parents are being more emotionally in tune with their children, and it's really important that we're able to do that, so that we have children that can talk to us, that can confide in us. And that really also is important, and that can be fostered if we are really tuning into their emotions, if we're able to have conversation that are non-judgmental, when we are able to do that perspective shifting, and we are able to really like do that balance between being able to parent them, teach them, and then being able to listen to them, and still taking care of their emotions too as well, and not really forsaking that aspect. And then we've talked about all of these other dynamics, but then it's really good to have emotional intelligence even for ourselves, right? Because then we are more self-aware. We are aware of how we affect other people. We are aware of when we are having a lot of different emotions, and then we also develop the skill of how to manage it, to be able to also be still empathetic towards other people, and so like all of these it's really important, so that for our own personal well-being, we are able to get to the space where ultimately we're able to manage some of these emotional aspects of our lives. And so our personal well-being is important. Stress can be reduced if we really look at our emotional intelligence. How our relationships can be impacted too as well. Now, let's look at some of the features of emotional intelligence. So, one is self awareness. So, I've talked about being self aware. And basically, that is really about recognizing and understanding one's own emotions, as well as their impact on our thoughts and behaviors. Okay. Sometimes we are not really self-aware, or we don't take the time to be self-aware. Okay, so self-aware is really it's really something that is cultivated. For one, if you have moments of reflection, if you're able to have moments of reflection, you really take time to think about yourself and how you behave and how your life is going, and how especially you are handling emotions, you've been handling emotions, and whether that's been productive or it hasn't been productive. And so self-awareness is one of the features of emotional intelligence. So the more self-aware you are, the more likely you are to be emotionally intelligent. So emotional intelligence requires self-awareness. One of the ways to foster self-awareness is through journaling. If that's something that you do, not every one of us likes to write, but that's something that can be important, to journal, especially when it comes to our emotions and how we are handling our emotions and how we've been dealing with our emotions, especially with everything that comes up at us from so many different directions. It's really important to be self-aware. Sometimes you can also foster self-awareness by really asking trusted people, what do you think about how I handle my emotions, or have there been times where is this something that you feel is an area that I need to improve on, and what are some of the instances, so you can really get feedback from a trusted person. Okay. And then we also have self-regulation. So self-regulation is basically really about being able to manage, and control your own emotions, your own impulses, and your own reactions. You can only drive around or just leave your house, and go out, and go out to in Accra, and then you see a lot of problems with self-regulation. With trotro drivers, yelling at people, and maybe even people in private cars and taxi, like yelling at people being angry. All of these things are self-regulation problems. Okay. And even, to be honest, even as parents, sometimes we may have some self-regulation problems, because if you're a parent, that children can really test you, and so then, you have that, like we also tested our parents. And so there's really important to, be self-regulated, even as parents, so that when, for example, we have to discipline, we are not disciplining, overboard, and then we are really doing things that really we shouldn't. And so that's self-regulation, being able to manage and restrain your emotions in a healthy way. Okay, being able to control your emotions in a healthy way, so that whatever decisions you make because of that emotions you are dealing with, you can make with a clear head. Another feature of emotional intelligence is motivation. So this is really about channeling your emotions to drive towards your goals, to be able to persevere in the face of setbacks, and to maintain optimism. Okay, sometimes motivation can be hard to find. And for a lot of different reasons. Sometimes it is a mental health condition that we are going through. Sometimes it's because of a stressful life event that we are going through. Sometimes there are certain things that have happened that can really get you down. So you have all sorts of emotions. You feel sad, you may be feeling depressed, and like that energy is something that's to be able to do something else that's more productive, that can be more channeled towards the goals. It can be difficult. I've heard it said that even when you are depressed, it's a sort of energy, and so that energy you have can be channeled towards being depressed, or you can channel that energy towards doing something that can get you out of your depression. And sometimes it's not that simple, but sometimes too, you can really decide to just take one little step, towards where you want to go. And it really requires channeling some of the emotions, the energy, quote unquote, of the emotions that you have towards taking that one positive step. um Another feature of emotional intelligence is empathy. That is something that I have talked about. When you're looking at empathy, it's when you're able to sense another person's emotions, be able to understand their perspective, and then to be able to really respond to that. Empathy really says, I see you, I hear you, I understand you. Those are the things that are communicated when you are empathetic towards another person. Then we have another feature being social skills, right? So being able to build and maintain relationships, to be able to communicate clearly, and to be able to inspire and influence others and resolve conflict diplomatically. It's a social skill, and that's like another feature of emotional intelligence. So that it's really being able to, you are really angry, or maybe someone has really made you angry, and you are so tempted to respond, but then rather than do that, you really look at employing social skills, like really looking at your body language, looking at your tone, looking at what you say and how you say it. All of these things are also social skills. These social skills are about how we relate, the skill of being able to relate to other people, especially in our social environment. Our social environment comprises our home, our work, our church, wherever it is that we are. All of these places that we have to relate with people at, these comprise our social environment. And the skill to be able to really communicate effectively, especially when emotions are involved. It's really important. So that's like the feature of emotional intelligence. So now, this is the practice session that I talked about. So I hope we are all ready. I'll give us after I finish reading the case example, I'll go back to the different features of emotional intelligence so that we can have our discussion. Okay. So here is our practice session. Rita is buying a dress from an online store owner whose name is Gina. Gina has already had a stressful day because one storekeeper failed to show up for work, so she is short-handed. When Rita reaches out to Gina in her DM, Rita gets frustrated by how long Gina is taking to respond. Gina, on the other hand, is frustrated by Rita's repeated request for a response. When Rita finally decides to call Gina, Gina is not friendly and answers Rita's questions about the dress rudely. Rita and Gina end up exchanging words with Gina hanging up. Okay, so I think because we all live in Accra, this is a situation that I think it's not really uncommon. Okay, so sometimes as you are engaging with people who are selling online, we may not necessarily always get that good feedback that we expect. But basically, I'll go over this again. Basically, you have Rita trying to purchase, a dress from Gina. But Gina is already frustrated because one person supposed to come and help her didn't show up. Now Rita, on the other hand, like her responses are delaying. So she just keeps asking, like, I haven't heard from you. I haven't heard from you. I haven't heard from you. Is the dress available? I haven't heard from you. Then at the end of the day, she's like, let me just call this person who is basically Gina. When they call when she calls, the conversation doesn't go well. Okay. And so then they end up exchanging words, and then Gina hangs up. So the first question is, what emotional intelligence features did Rita lack? Okay. What emotional intelligence features did Rita lack? Okay. So what did Rita do? She reached out when she wasn't getting a response. So she repeatedly was asking for a response. And then also when she called and Gina was not friendly, she also ended up giving it to Gina. So let's look at the features. We can see the features in the diagram on the right.
All right.
Yes, Erasmus.
Yes.
Madam, please, I think it's social skills
Okay. Please explain further.
because with the social skills, it talks about your interpersonal relationship with others too,
Okay.
and understanding them, basically communication. So if for any reason you are trading with someone and then the person is not giving you the necessary energy that you want, at least you should communicate more and understand the person's point of view as well, and know that the trading is not going to end there. You will definitely have subsequent trading that you'll be doing with her, so you don't just get angry and then do your things.
Yes, that is true. So the social skills that was needed and wasn't there as well.
Yes, madam.
Okay, does anyone have any other response?
Okay, so you spoke about empathy. So I think the customer should have probably found out what was happening to the shop owner, and maybe the the shop owner as well should have been able to analyze her emotions to realize that she's having a stressful day, and because of the stressful day, it's probably impacting her work, and so she has to perhaps correct that. So I'm thinking empathy. There was no empathy on the part of the
Rita, the buyer.
yes, and the shop owner as well should have probably analyzed and assessed her emotions, her own emotions, and realized she was having a stressful day, and she probably should have regulated her emotions and not allowed that to impact her business. Yeah, that's what I think.
Thank you so much. Yes. So I think that as a buyer, when you reach out to wanting to purchase something, and you are not getting that feedback, as quickly as possible, to be able to try to do that perspective shifting, to be able to empathize, you can really think about like alternative scenarios that may have led to the delay. Maybe this individual is dealing with a lot of customers. Yeah, this person is a human being. So many things could happen. Maybe this person, this is a side gig, and then they are also at work, and then they can't really respond. So you can really think about alternative scenarios. Sometimes there's in empathizing, we are not really always thinking about something that may necessarily be realistic, like something that you actually know, but you can just imagine that, oh, perhaps this is what might be going on with the person I'm trying to reach, and that for some good reason they are not able to get back to me. And so because of that, I am not going to be emotionally reactive. And in the words of Erasmus, do your things. So that is another one. And what about again, looking at Rita, what about the other components of emotional intelligence? Did she have it? We talked about social skills and empathy. What about self-regulation? What about self-awareness and then decision making? Did Rita have it or didn't she have it? So this is the person that is making the purchase.
I think Adam, you can proceed with your submission.
Okay, thank you very much, Doc. So I think to add up to the empathy, the self-regulation, um, here I think she might be having a problem with this one. Looking at the fact that she's not able to consider her environment and knowing that maybe the other person at the other side might be going through certain uh, phenomena or be going through some emotions. He thinks that whatever she wants at a particular time, she want to get it, forgetting that the other side of the coin might not be so clean as she might be going through. So I think that with the self-regulatory, she have not really utilized that one well, and with the self-awareness, I think that she have to accept the fact that uh, she's really talking to another person, which is not, um, uh, which is different from her. So I think that she really have to consider knowing herself and knowing that not everybody will be like her. Sometimes a word that you understand may sound different to somebody at the other side. So she have to know herself, knowing that there are certain things that she's doing now that requires calling and testing might not really do well with the other party. So she still have to work on the self-awareness and the self-regulation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then let's look at Khadija too as well.
Okay, so with Rita, I want to talk about social skill.
Okay.
So Rita, on the other hand, didn't know what was going on with Gina,
Mm-hmm.
whether Gina was having a stressful day or not, because it was in her DM, meaning there was no verbal conversation or communication.
Mm-hmm.
So Gina, on the other hand, who is a business owner, didn't have the social skill because she wasn't able to maintain a healthy conversation regardless of Gina was supposed to understand, and then um I don't know. So I think Gina lacked social skill, not Rita, because Rita didn't know what was going on with the business owner. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So a lot of good input and input so far. So then the next, so I think some of the responses also looked at Gina's behavior. So does anyone also have any inputs concerning Gina's behavior? And what else? So we've looked at Gina, not having the social skills as well. What about empathy? Was Gina supposed to also be? I think we are also talked about empathy. I think Mr. Larbi talked about the empathy part. So what about self-regulation? Okay. What about self-regulation when it comes to Gina and her decision-making ability?
Um, Gina lacked self-regulation because you as a business owner is unable to um balance your emotions or know when to react.
Hmm.
In as much as she was frustrated and tired, she could have at least have a nice way of communicating with Rita.
Yeah.
So I think she wasn't able to regulate her emotions.
Yes. Yes. And I think even when it comes to Gina's social skills, I mean, sometimes we have also online social skills, right? So sometimes when there are those automatic responses, right? That's when you reach out to someone who is selling the product, they may tell you that, oh, these are our business hours. And sometimes we have a lot of orders, so please be patient. We'll get back to you. It may take some time, but we may get back to you within an hour, 2 hours, like whatever it is. And so then that is a kind of social skill, so that once someone comes to you are able to say, you are able to even communicate with the person, appropriately, so that it can avoid some of these additional stresses, that can come up. So in really looking at what could have happened, let's look at for Rita and for Gina. How else could they have exhibited good social skills, good self-awareness, good self regulation, good empathy, and then decision making? So we can even personalize it and say, if I was Rita or if I was Gina, this is the decision I will make as someone with high emotional intelligence or with good emotional intelligence. So we've talked about what didn't go well. So now, practically speaking, how will we respond as people with good emotional intelligence on any of the five domains?
Please, I think um the the best way Gina could have handled this situation was just come clean, just be real, tell Rita that this is what I'm going through, as in the social skill, this is what I'm going through, and allow Rita to be empathetic about the whole thing,
Mm,
considering her feelings and the stress she's going through because one other colleague didn't come to work and all of that. She should have just come clean. I believe Gina would have understood her perfectly.
yes. So then she could have really tried to communicate well so that she can get empathy
Yes,
from
please.
Rita.
Yeah,
Thank you very much. And that would have also have required some self-regulation.
exactly.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Does anyone have any contribution?
Yes, so look, I think the decision making, Gina could have maybe have a very strong decision making skill to be able to communicate whatever solution or concern that Rita brought on board. She'll be able to address it well, and then allow the matter to die down well. because at the point when she was calling and getting the frustration, and then having received a call, she was expecting something positive from you. So at the point when you receive the call, at this point you just have to make an informed decision and then inform her what you can assist her with, what you cannot assist her with. Maybe because of the pressure, you can assist her with this thing maybe at a particular time, or she should give you a period for you to be able to assist her. In this one, I'm sure Rita will understand like the situation that she's going through, knowing that she's understaffed, and then she'll be able to manage the time, and then she'll also be patient whilst waiting for the goods to be delivered. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. So, knowing that even like big selling, comes with so many different variables to be able to already make the decision that, okay, today I'm very stressed. At the very beginning, she should have been able to make a decision about how she was going to respond to customers, knowing that it is possible for you know for it is possible for responses to delay also, and all of that. So yes, her decision making was also lacking, and so there should have been even like maybe putting information on the status to say, today responses might delay, please bear with me, and all of that. So yes, thank you. Okay. So with that, the practice session is over. I'll just conclude and basically say that lack of emotional intelligence can have a lot of different impacts. So even looking at the practice session that we had, you can imagine that and Rita is not going to be going back to Gina to buy anything because of that experience. And so then what does that mean? Gina has lost a customer. And not only has Gina lost a customer, but Gina has also lost anyone that Rita would have referred her to, right? And just because, there wasn't that emotional intelligence that was exhibited. So when one doesn't have emotional intelligence or good emotional intelligence, it can impact work. It can impact even your ability to be promoted in work, right? So who wants to promote anyone to a leadership position if they don't have good control over their emotions, for one? Okay. And so it can impact work. It can impact your ability to even perform well in your teams. It can impact your relationship because, for example, you have a beloved, and you don't have a very good grasp of your emotions. You can imagine that it's going to bring about a lot of conflict in the relationship. And they have also talked about leadership skills, the importance of being able to have a good grasp of emotions when it comes to emotional intelligence and being a leader, being able to really take care of the emotions of the people that that you're also dealing with. Like I also said at the very beginning, it is a continual learning process. So even I that I'm giving this talk, I also continue to grow and continue to be self-aware, continue to look at my decision making, continue to be reflective, and have to do the self-regulations, because it's not something that you can just check a box and say I've done it, because the emotions can be so varied in people that sometimes just when you think that you've seen it all, you have to deal with something else. And so that continual growth is key. Thank you very much.
Yeah, welcome.
All right, so Doc, thank you so much for your presentation. It was very, very insightful as always, and very hands-on. I really loved the practice session. And one thing that stood out for me from your presentation was when you spoke about the importance of emotional intelligence in leadership, and that as leaders, we are not just leading human beings, but human beings are emotional, and so it's important to lead not just from the rational cognitive perspective, but also from the emotional perspective, because human beings are also emotional beings. And I also love what you spoke about conflict resolution, and that emotional intelligence is very important in conflict resolution. And that sometimes you just have to disagree, agree to disagree, sorry. You have to sometimes agree to disagree. And that is not all the time that you get a consensus on an issue. And that for me was enlightening. I didn't know that about conflict resolution. So thank you once again for your presentation, Doc. I'd like to ask a question. You spoke about yelling, and that yelling means we are not regulating ourselves well. So I thought about that, and I was wondering, so isn't it important to rather express your emotions rather than bottle your emotions? Because I believe that's one thing that psychologists encourage us to do. We should express and feel all our emotions and not bottle them up. So how do we navigate that?
The thing with yelling is that it is you when you do that, the only thing somebody at the other end can see is that you are upset, but it doesn't necessarily communicate why you are upset in a way that they can hear you, that they can understand you, and even empathize and see it, and to be able to change from that. So you can still express your emotions, you can still express your perspective without necessarily yelling. And as a matter of fact, that is better, because then the individual is able to really be in a position where they can even do perspective shifting, because yelling prevents them from doing perspective shifting, where they can see where you're coming from. All they see is, wow, this person is really angry, let me keep quiet, or let me just you know either yell back, because I'm not going to tolerate this. But it doesn't really solve a problem.
Okay, so if in a conversation you are really upset, you are angry, and you want to express that, what do you do? How,
So
how do you bite your tongue and not yell, for instance?
you have to, that's where self-regulation comes in. So sometimes you need to be able to say, you know what, I'm getting really upset, let's like take a few, let's take a few minutes, and then um come back to this conversation when we are both clear-headed, because this is really, it's not going anywhere, dependent, like, because of how emotional we are getting. Let's do this without any of us being really overly emotional and reactive. So it's really important to be able to first be self-aware, in terms of knowing that, I'm really getting worked up, and to be able to regulate yourself, in the sense that, okay, so first you are self-aware, then the next thing becomes, let me self-regulate, so that I can actually communicate, because without that self-regulation, no communication is happening. It's just reaction upon reaction upon reaction. So that's what needs to happen, where there's that timeout, self-awareness, self-regulation, then you make the decision to do a timeout.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And if you have any questions, you can drop your questions in the chat box, or you can raise your hand virtually, and you'll be an opportunity to ask a question.
I think Adam had a question.
Okay. So Adam, you can proceed with your question. Okay. So I think time is fast spent. So Doc, if you have any takeaways to take from this presentation, would you like to share them?
Basically, I think it's a journey, like I think I talked about, it's a journey, the whole idea of really growing more emotionally intelligent. But it's really something that's important, because it really helps us have good relationships, and we really can't exist without good relationships. So it's something that we have to be really intentional about. Sometimes we will fail in doing that, but then the recovery is what's important, and being able to apologize, and being able to go back and really have conversations the way that you would ideally have had it. Those things never hurt. It's also part of being emotionally intelligent. So if you fail, recovery is also important. You can still try to repair any exchange that is not emotionally intelligent. Thank you.
All right, Doc. So thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. We've had a very fantastic evening, and we're so grateful to you for your presentation, the insights you shared on thriving with emotional intelligence. Was loaded with nuggets. I took home a lot of insights from your presentation, and it's indeed been a very impactful session. And I believe I speak on behalf of most of us when I say it's been truly impactful and worthwhile participating in this session. So thank you so much, Doc, for your time and for always being so generous with your insights, your expertise, and your experience. So we're so grateful once again. Thank you.
Thank you too. Thank you so much.
Okay. All right. So thank you, all of you. Thank you for joining today's session. It's been a very impactful session, and I hope you found it very useful. And to summarize some of the key points that came out of the presentation, I took down a few notes. I'll briefly go over them. Doc spoke about emotional intelligence and how it helps us to be adaptable and resilient when the changes of life occur. And one thing that Doc mentioned that really stood out for me was it's important for us to not make permanent decisions when we are emotional. That really stood out for me. So do not make permanent decisions when you're emotional, because if you do, there are chances you would regret making those decisions. So Doc also spoke about self-awareness and the fact that it's cultivated. It's not it's not a destination, it's a journey. We have to cultivate, we have to be intentional about cultivating self-awareness. And I think Doc also spoke about self-regulation, the importance of us managing our emotions and impulses. And also, Doc spoke about effective leadership and how leaders should be able to recognize that human beings are emotional and not just rational. And so that should be brought to bear in our leadership. And I also particularly found very enlightening when Doc spoke about the fact that emotional intelligence helps us to understand our team members, helps us to understand how they show up in team settings, their temperaments, and basically how they engage in team dynamics. And so it's very important for all of us to develop emotional intelligence because it helps not just at the workplace, it helps in our teams, it helps in various social settings. So yeah, basically that's what I've jotted down here. And yeah, thank you so much for connecting. It's been a very good session, and I'd like to thank all of you for taking time to be part of this presentation. You could have done so many other things, but you chose to be part of this presentation, and we don't take that for granted. And so I'd like to also use this opportunity to invite you to our next session, which will take place on August 7th with Mr. Jimmy Tewe, who's a transformational specialist and career and executive coach. And he'll be speaking on leadership, how to develop the leader in you. How to develop the leader in you. So to get information about our upcoming webinars, do feel free to connect with Regent University on Facebook. That's facebook.com/Regent Ghana, or Regent Gram on Instagram, or Regent Ghana on Twitter. So thank you once again for your participation and engagement. And I look forward to connecting with you soon.